Joining us now is State Representative Tony Scott from Monroe, who is putting forward a lot of bills in regards to online gambling and sports betting. And one of those pieces of legislation aims to bring in-state college wagering. Why put forward so many bills on this?
We've had now a year or so of actually sports gambling working in the state. What things need to change that we could see that was working or not working now that we have this data.
Right now, are Connecticut residents allowed to make bets on Connecticut-based teams like a UConn, a Yale, or a Quinnipiac, or no?
So on regular season games, they're not. But if they play in a tournament, so the NCAA tournament or a conference tournament, they are actually allowed to bet on those teams. So there's a little bit of a loophole that was written into the law. So when there's larger tournaments that they're entering in as part of, they can. So we're already kind of doing it, but not the regular season games, the ones that we are going on right now before we get to March Madness. You cannot bet those if you live in the state or if you're in the state of Connecticut. If you go to a different state, if you happen to be traveling to a state that has sports gambling, which there are a lot of states out there that have it. I think it's 39 now have approved it. If you're in another state for a reason on vacation or whatever, you can then bet UConn, Quinnipiac, Sacred Heart. You can do that.
Explain to us, Representative Scott, why right now do we block Connecticut residents from betting on regular season UConn basketball games, for example? Why can't we do that?
There is, in the past, and we're talking far past, and Boston College is one of the big names out there. There was point shaving or game fixing events that were happening. So underground bookmakers, the old fashioned bookmaker who would, pay players to say, hey, you are favored to win by 8 points. If you just win by 3, that would be great. And I'll give you money to do that. So they were manipulating the scores of the games. So because of that, and because of the closeness that people could be to the players in the individual states and the influence they could have, the idea is that we kind of block that from happening. So let's not even bet on that. So it doesn't, those influences could not be a part of affecting the game. But what we've seen is 23 states you're allowed to bet on your teams in state already, 23 across the country. What we're seeing though is that DraftKings and FanDuel, who are the ones who run the websites that these bets go through, they have technology and ability to find these betting irregularities. If you're betting Quinnipiac, let's say, only has $10,000 they get bet on them in a normal day. Well, if all of a sudden hundreds of thousands of dollars are coming in on this game, it's going to be detected immediately, and they're going to shut that down, and they're going to be able to find that out immediately. If there's something irregular going on with this game, we're in the past, if you're betting in offshore books, which means betting something like in Europe, you go online and bet a place in Europe, or you go to your old-fashioned bookmaker, those detections will never happen. You won't be able to see it. So actually, by bringing it out of the underground and into the light, we have ability to kind of track these things a lot better and find out immediately when there's issues.
Sure. So the more control, if you will, that we have over it, or the more access that we have to it, it's like the same thing as the debate of, do you allow college age students to be able to drink alcohol? It's that same kind of argument of, if you make it legal, then kids aren't going to be sneaking it and you can track it more. It's that same sort of concept. I do understand that. My question, Representative Scott, though, with this, do you worry, though, that we're going to see an even bigger issue with especially college age students with gambling addictions and losing a lot of money? Because that seems to be the biggest demographic of people in Connecticut who have a gambling addiction in recent years.
I do think that is something we need to keep an eye on. We do have some things in place already to make sure that those who need help can get help. I think that advertising is something we really need to look at to make sure that it's not predatory. Some of these advertising and some of these free bets that they're giving to try to bring people in, we need to make sure those things are not going too far. Definitely more work we can to kind of help do that. I also have a bill in for this year that gives players an option to opt out of certain limits, opt out of certain type of bets. And also sports. Like I don't want to bet college basketball anymore. You can self-select that. Right now, that's not a possibility. So I want to give these people the chance to, raise their hand and say, we have a problem, I'm going to shut this down, and give them a little bit more power to themselves.
Right. Like we've opened Pandora's box. So we need to make sure that we have, as many regulation sort of in the game as possible versus kind of leaving things by the wayside or just seeing what happens, like you're saying, in secret or in the underground, if you will. And actually, just so people know, State Representative Tony Scott has reportedly introduced, it looks like 5 pieces of legislation aimed at the general statutes of Connecticut, talking about online sports betting.
To make sure, just like what we're doing, marijuana, that's very new too. We just need to make tweaks. Now we know it's in the market. We know how things are progressing. And I think from a consumer-friendly standpoint, and that's where I'm looking at a lot of these bills is from the view of the bettor, to make sure you're not getting taken advantage of from betting lines, but also things like if a bet gets canceled, make sure that bet gets announced before the actual event happens. That does happen sometimes, that bets get canceled. But we want to make sure that the consumer is not being taken advantage of. And, that's why General Law will be taking a look at these bills this session, because they're the consumer advocates.